Hi, my name is Georginia Nwoke. I'm a clinical registered psychologist in Alberta. This is my 13th year of living in Calgary, Alberta. And I work with adults, I work with youths, and I also work with children. And specifically, I also work with youths within the criminal justice system. And from my experience of being an immigrant in Calgary, I know that there are two types of immigrants. Some of us come from war-torn areas. Some of us make that decision to migrate. We come in through the permanent residence. So what I see is that those of us that come in through the permanent residence, we seem to be more stable mentally because we make that conscious decision to migrate. Some of us even come on holiday to Calgary and survey the place, have that mental picture where we want to go before we make that decision to sell our stuff, raise money, and then migrate. We also have some of us who are from the war-torn areas, like those coming from Sudan, those coming from the Middle East, where these places have been ravaged by war. Some of them, a lot of them, it's not their choice to migrate, but because of, finding safety for themselves and their families, they have to come to Canada. And for them, their mental health in their families is also different. I'm just going to start with those of them who are coming from the war-torn areas. These families, I see a lot of PTSD. And out there, we see a lot of challenges in their parenting strategies or in raising their children. And it also affects their relationships, in their married life. So what we see is that we're beginning to see a lot of divorce in these families. We're beginning to see a lot of their youths come into the criminal justice system. And we're beginning to see that the mental issues, health issues of the parents are impacting the children, in form of what we call a vicarious trauma. And then what we see is that most of the fathers from these families go back home because either they can't find a job or they don't have the language, which is English, to find a job. And most of them, their language is either French or Arabic or something, or one other language, right? So they find it difficult to settle and get into the system. And even if they can speak English, a lot of them don't have what they call in Canada the Canadian experience. Because no matter your qualification, you have to have the Canadian experience before you can get into your career, maybe retrain or something. So what we see is that a lot of the fathers go back home and then the mothers have to stick with their children. There's a proverb that says that as a mother, you can't run and leave your kids. So the mothers stay around and they stick it out. And then because of the mother raising the children, we begin to see a lot of challenges in the mental health of the children. We begin to see a lot of the boys from these families step up to take the role of husbands and the role of fathers. There's also a lot of poverty in these families. And the children, when they go to school, they have to see what other kids are wearing and they want to aspire to be like other kids. So they might end up, shoplifting, and then before you know it, they find themselves in the criminal justice system. And then once they come in, that first one is on and on and on. And for them, it's like, okay, I've been caught once, I might as well do it again. So we see a lot of that. And when these children go to court, because there's already a stigma on the family about the child being, incarcerated or something like that, so the parents don't show up, the mother doesn't show up in court. So what we see is that there's nobody from within that family or extended family that shows up in court for the kids. So the child, is lonely, suffers from abandonment, and as far as the child is concerned, I don't have any other life than the criminal life. And this impacts the whole community because everybody gossips about it, and then the mother is shameful and the father is back home. As far as the father is concerned, the boy is the son of the mother. There's a proverb that says that when a boy does well, he is the son of the father. But when he doesn't do well, he is the son of the mother. And we're beginning to see a lot of that, not just in Calgary, even in the whole of Canada. And it's something that the government actually needs to pay attention to. And there are a lot of organizations like Center for Newcomers that is, working hard to pay attention to these youths because we are beginning to see a lot of them come into the criminal justice system. And then these mothers who are left alone, they have to find a way of looking after themselves. Some of them go drinking or go into shisha bars and everything to be able to find comfort and be able to cope with the trauma. And these families have like 5-6 children, so a lot of mental health issues are there. We're beginning to see depression, anxiety, and even for the younger couples, because for the permanent residence system, if you're up to 50, age, becomes a barrier for you. So we're beginning to see younger couples who come in that are still of that childbearing age. So what we see is that in such families, there's a lot of postpartum depression. And we're beginning to see postpartum psychosis in these families. Because back home, when you have a child, your mother is there, your mother-in-law is there, your aunties are there to bath the baby, even to give you the new mom a bath. But here you're alone. And then you discover that the young mom becomes depressed, relationship is impacted, she can't even look after herself or even after the baby, she becomes depressed. And culturally, it's a stigma to say that you're depressed. How dare you say you're depressed or you're anxious? No, you dare not say that. Postpartum depression is very huge in our communities. And the truth is that a lot of these young moms or their families refuse to go to the hospital. They refuse to go to the hospital, and they look at it as a spiritual attack. The witches back home are attacking me. That's why I'm seeing things. That's why I'm hallucinating. They don't look at it as a medical issue. They try to solve it on their own. Sometimes I see women who go back home and say, oh, I'm going to go to prayer houses to pray. I'm going to go so that my family can support me to pray, because it's not normal. So they refuse to go to the hospital. And even the men who are involved in such families refuse to send their wives to the hospital because it's a stigma. How dare you say that your wife is crazy and seeing stuff? It's uncultural, it's unhelpful in the immigrant community as well. Even for the youths, there's a lot of them that are becoming at risk of getting into the system, at risk of child and family services because of the domestic violence going on in these families. The men, when they come in, they can't get into their career, so they can begin to work in the factories or do night jobs. And a lot of them have PhDs and even masters in their field. They are quite experienced, and with that frustration, it affects their relationship. And then arguments, there's a high level of anger in these families, and then we begin to see violence in the families. And most times the women keep it secret, because how dare you say that you're being abused by your husband? So they don't say anything. But it gets to a point where the kids can say something in school, or the woman tells a friend, and then it leaks out. And then they discover that the cops and the social services step in. And once they step in, the kids maybe are taken away. And then once the kids are taken away, it also becomes a big challenge for the woman, because the families back home will be calling the woman to make some threats. Okay, you reported our son to the police. We're going to kill you. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. So there's a lot of mental health issues in these families. And this impacts also their parenting. For example, the youths or the children, when they go to school, you're in Canada. That's what they're told. But when you're at home, you're in Africa, or you're in Iraq, you're in the Middle East, you're within your cultural setting, you're within your ethnic heritage. So basically, these kids have double personalities. When they go to school, they behave like Canadians. They speak like Canadians, they behave like Canadians. But back home, you dare not look your parents in the eye, you dare not talk back at your parents. The instruction is, you do what I say. And they dare not have a voice at home. So you discover that some of these kids are traumatized. And even at home as well, you're expected to study what your parents tell you. Every immigrant family expects the children to study medicine, law, engineering, IT, all those professional courses. Because for an immigrant family, educational success is everything. And culturally, you expect that when you raise your kids, when you get old, your children are going to take care of you. Because according to the immigrant culture, we don't send our old ones to old people's homes. We don't send them to nursing homes, no. You look after your parents until they go. That's the culture, from generation to generation. And that's also, even for us immigrants here, it impacts our finances. Because no matter how much you're earning, you're still expected to send money to your parents back home. Even if they're old, you're expected to get support staff, somebody who will be looking after them, you pay their salaries, feed them. You're expected to financially look after your nieces and nephews and uncles and aunties. So you discover that as immigrants, when you're working here, you're not just working for yourself. You're basically working for everybody, for an entire generation. So that creates a lot of pain and a lot of weight, both emotionally, physically, and financially, on these immigrant families. And most times as well, the men have not even provided for their own families. But the priority is for people back home. Yeah, I would really like to talk about what the youths who come into this criminal justice system face. One, the parents don't come, they don't show up in court, so they feel unsupported. And what we see is that, what I see is that as well, we don't have what we call cultural brokers who come to court, at least to represent the family. Because if within the community they can have opportunity to send somebody who is educated, who can speak English, who can, be there to support the kids, that might be able to help them. But we don't see that at all. So when the kid is in court, he's all in by himself. And they discover that these kids, they just go on and reoffend and reoffend and reoffend. And they never get to stop because they feel unsupported. So that's really huge, for the youths. And I was talking about the educational system as well and the expectation of the child. That huge expectation is actually create a lot of mental health issues. For me and my family, I had a lot of expectations for my children. I expected my son to go to medical school. I did everything, hired private lesson teachers to get it into their head. Because for me, I wanted to go to medical school when I was young, when I was in school. But I couldn't do it because physics was too hard for me. So I expected most of my kids to read medicine or something like that. But I remember one day my son took an option in sociology, and they called me while he was in the bus and said, "Mom, I found my passion." And I said, "What is that?" He said, "Sociology." And I said, "What?" I broke down. But I told him I still loved him and everything, but I'm glad I allowed him to do what he wanted to do. But for immigrant families, educational success is all and all. We tell the kids, I came to Canada because of you. I was comfortable in my career, I came to Canada because you could have an option to do whatever you want, work anywhere you want in the world. So you discover that this brings a lot of weight on the children. And that high level of expectation makes them, even when they are not passing their courses in school, they're not going to tell you. So we see a lot of immigrant young persons, they get into the universities, they're not passing their courses, they don't tell their parents. They might be there for 2-3 years and then they fail out and their parents don't know. So, and their parents feel disappointed and feel that they haven't actually done what they need to do. And it would be nice for us as immigrant parents to let our kids do what they want to do and find their passion in this environment, because it's an environment that there are a lot of options for young people, a lot of options for children, instead of putting that very high level of expectations on them. I think if we leave it open for them to choose, they will actually do better. I would like to address the issue of poverty within the immigrant families, because it's something I went through with my family. Earlier I've talked about how our husbands or our brothers can't find their feet because of, the expectations in Canada, and they can't get into their careers and they have to go back home, to be able to find a job and be working or be doing one little business or the other to support their families while the family is trying to stabilize. I went through that. Like when I was trying to do my exams, my husband lost his first job in Canada, and then he had to go back home to find what he could do to be able to support us. And with the children and everything, that was very, very overwhelming for me. I had huge anxiety, and I tried to manage it on my own initially, but I couldn't. I had to go to see my doctor, and the doctor had to put me on medication to be able to sleep and to be able to cope with the anxiety. Even my children felt the impact because I was becoming very irritable. I was snapping at them at very little things, and at the end I would reflect and I say, "Georgina, what are you doing?" That was really, really tormenting for me. Because my husband wasn't here to support me, that affected how many times I wrote my exams. I failed until I lost count. I gave up and I said, this licensing thing, I'm not going to do it again. But I remember one of my colleagues, she said, "Georgina, you have all the experience. You don't get the license. Nobody could believe that you can do the job. Please try again." And then there was another colleague who usually would come to our office then to do some work, and she was a provisional. And when she passed her exams, and I said, "How did you do it?" And I didn't have money to buy the materials for the exam. And she said she gave her materials to somebody, and then she asked the person to drive to my office and give me the materials. And I had to make some copies to be able to start, because these exam materials are so expensive, for me to buy. And then I had to pay the mortgage. And I remember calling the bank, to give us some mortgage relief or give us some months break. And they said, "Oh, you've already taken 3 months break. We're not going to give you again." And the lady who was on the other side said, "Ma'am, if you can't pay the mortgage, pack out." And that was the thing she said, and she dropped her phone. That really broke my heart. But at the end of the day, we were able to figure it out. So whatever I was making from the job I was doing, we paid the mortgage. Sometimes there were no food. I remember one day I was doing night job, and I went to UFC with 2 of my girls to study. And that day we could we just found $5 in the house and we used it to fill, put gas in our car. And then as we were running out, because it was about to rain, it was very windy. So as we were running out, my daughter saw $20 stuck in the tickets of the flowers there. And we stopped, and my daughter said, "Mom, see money." And I said, "No, that looks like paper, it's not money." And people were all running to their cars because it was very windy. And my daughter picked it and we all touched it, and we said, well, for us to be sure that it's money, if we use it and they accept it, then it's money. Then we looked around, we stood there for like a minute, looked around, because we come from a culture where if you pick money, if you pick something, you have to find the owner and give it to the owner. So we stood there for a couple of minutes and nobody was stopping to say he or she lost money, right? So we took that $20, went to gas station, put $5 gas, took $10, went and bought a pack of chicken to cook rice at home because we had raw rice, and then we held on to $5 for the next day because we didn't know what expenditure we were expecting the next day. So, and we just felt that whoever lost that money, God used that person to bless us. And some of these kids I work with within the criminal justice system, sometimes they don't have food to eat. Sometimes they have to go into the train without a train ticket because there's no money to buy train tickets. And if they are caught, they're giving tickets for $500 tickets, and sometimes they can't carry lunch to school because when they carry the lunch to school, there's no fish or meat in the lunch, right? Because they're going to eat in the lunchroom. So the shame of eating something like that without anything in it, because of that, sometimes they have to walk back home to go have lunch from leftover the night before and then get back to school. And some of them even tell their teachers and say, "Hey, I'm going to go back home to have lunch," and their teachers know. So poverty within those communities is a very, very huge one, and it's something that the government might have to look into, to use the people to help the people. Because if you send a white man to go to a black immigrant community to talk about this, everybody's going to put up a facade, right? No, I'm okay, because the cliche is I'm fine, nothing is wrong. Because who are you going to wash your dirty linen to? It's never done culturally because there's a stigma that comes with it and the shame involved. So I'm just hoping that organizations like Center for Newcomers and other similar organizations can spring up to be able to support these communities because it's huge. More light on the needs and the gaps in services for immigrant youths. What I see there as a clinician is that some of these immigrant youths, even within the criminal justice system, or those who have experienced traumas, there are no culturally specific services for them. There are no treatment centers for them. And when you talk about treatment, they tell you they don't want to go talk to a white man to say they experienced trauma or something is happening in their family. They don't want to do it. But that's a need that will actually help these youths to be able to heal from their trauma, to be able to move on. But we don't have those services for them. And even when the only thing we have is maybe referring to them to individuals that could work with them. But I know that Center for Newcomers is doing a great job with them, having groups for them, having mentors that can kind of handhold them and support them all through until they stabilize, come out of crime, and then be able to be meaningful to the society. I've talked about cultural court brokers who come in and stand for them and support them. And then so that even the judges and the government will know that, hey, within this community, there's somebody who is supporting them, who is standing on behalf of their families, because the families will never show up. Another thing as well is that there are no, I would say, mentors who will support both the men and the women when they're coming into Canada. Because if we pair up, let's say, a family that is coming in with another family that has stabilized, like my family that has been through stuff, right? And then a new family is coming in, and I know that this family is coming in. I go to the airport, I receive them, walk them through the ropes, connect them to resources. At least they feel welcome. So through that way, the man who is coming in this family may have another man in Canada who will be able to show him the ropes as a man. Because what we see is that back home, when a man is struggling, the man discusses his issue with mentors within the family, within the extended family. They meet every market day to discuss issues going on within the community, and their mentors are assigned. But in this place, there are no such relationship. Everybody is an individualistic society. Everybody is on their own, except for organizations like Center for Newcomers that will be able to step into families and do stuff. okay, with these families. So what I'm seeing is that there are no culturally specific support for these families. Once you come in, you're on your own, and you're able to kind of sort things out by yourself. So we need people, organizations that will handhold these immigrants, not just African immigrants, immigrants from the Middle East, immigrants from all over the world, even the Afghanistan who came in, recently. I was thinking about them this morning. It would have been awesome to find also some Afghanistan people who have been here for some time, to be able to walk them through the ropes, welcome them, so that they will see that some of their people are already here. So that's also huge. So these families need support. They need somebody that will say, yes, this person has got my back. An average immigrant, trust is a huge issue. How do I trust you when I know that you might judge me? I'm not going to trust you. Even for the youths, how do they trust people when they think that they'll be judged? So you discover that for these youths who are immigrants, you might see them like 3, 4, 5 times before they can even say hello to you. So the first 3, 4 sessions might just be you and them getting to have coffee, or you and them getting to sit down to have a talk. And that's why, like I said, parenting is a very huge task for immigrant parents. They speak it out at home. You're from Africa, or you're from Nigeria, you're from Ghana. When you're in school, you're in Canada. But once you step into the house, you're African. So you discover that the kids struggle in that dilemma of being able to cope. And they pretend to be who they are not when they're at home. Then when they go to school, they can feel free and do whatever they want. Some of them even take their clothes and hide it and go to school, so that when they go to school, they can wear Canadian clothes. And then when they're at home, they can dress like mom and dad expect them to dress. And then parents get to struggle when the kids say, I'm 18, I'm moving out of the house. So they get the shock of their life. Culturally, girls marry from home, and boys stay home until they're getting married. After they get married, they leave the house and go live with their wives. Sometimes even when you marry as a young guy, you're going to live with your new wife in that same house if there's a big house, right? Culturally, you're not expected to walk away from your parents, because as a girl, if you walk away at 18, you're regarded to be a prostitute. It's regarded that you're going to go be sleeping with boys and everything. So, but what we are beginning to see now is that these are young persons are leaving home at the age of 18. Some of them leave Calgary and they go to school in BC because they want to be free. They want to be free from the trauma. They want to be free from the domestic violence. They want to be free from the expectations of dad and mom. And from there, they're not coming back. During the summer, they tell you they have summer jobs because they don't want to come home, right? And then parents feel abandoned, and then their mental health issues kind of increases and increases. Parents, when we migrate, we still believe that we are here for the children to go to school and become what they want to become. We are still hoping to go back home. We're still hoping to go back to Nigeria. We're still hoping to go back to Africa. We're still hoping to go back to the Middle East or wherever we come from. And being in that frame of mind is also a mental health issue. Because where do you stand? You have one leg in Canada, one leg back home. So with that, you discover that the person really never commits or invests in the environment where we are. So that's also a lot of mental health issues. And then with the COVID as well, naturally a man is supposed to take care of his family financially and everything. That's why some immigrant men, they don't allow their wives to work, especially when the babies are young, because you're expected culturally to look after your family. But with COVID, there has been a lot of job losses. So now you discover that there's change in gender roles. A lot of women with the little jobs they are doing, they're using that to support their families. And this actually creates a lot of mental health issues for the men, and they can't stand it. So that's a lot for the family to take in, and that affects the whole family, affects the children. And then we're beginning to see a lot of our children as well being diagnosed with ADHD. And sometimes when I work with these kids, you discover that loss of concentration or that agitation is actually traceable back to when domestic violence started in the family. Because once dad and mom starts raising their voice, the child sits on the bed and is agitated. I had a boy say to me that once they start, even if I'm asleep at 2 a.m., I just sit up on my bed because I could hear their voice. And in Canada, every house is made with wood, right? But back home it's made with brick. So even if something is happening in dad's rooms or mom's room, you won't hear anything. But in Canada, you can hear everything that happens with the parents, even when the kids are asleep. So that agitation starts and it goes into the child goes into the school, and with that agitation continues. And once the child is diagnosed with ADHD, the parents don't believe that the teacher is right or the psychologist is right. And culturally, we don't believe in giving our children medication. So mom can give medication maybe while the child is going to school, but once there's a holiday or summer, the parents stop giving the medication. That's why the youths as well, you discover that when they're in custody, they can take their medications. But once they step out of the door, even before they leave, they tell you, Georgiana, I'm not going to take this. I can't take this medication. Because culturally, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to pray for your child to get well. Your belief is that when you have a child, the child is perfect and a perfect gift from God. So that child is not expected to have any mental health issues or any diagnosis, even though the parents are the main cause of the trauma in the child. So that's a lot for the children to take in. I had a lot, as an immigrant parent in my family, we had a lot of challenges with parenting our kids. And as our kids began to grow, and I realized that no, everything I've been through, immigrant families that are coming behind me don't have to go through it. So I had to document this into a little book I've called 110 Nuggets for Excellent Parenting.